You're listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.
So these cycles carry on. Around 42 is a really, really critical one. And this actually ties into Kimberly's question.
Okay, shout out to Kimberly.
Kimberly's answer.
A member of the Louisa's Patreon community, Feel Good Astrology.
Because she said, I'd love to know more about midlife crisis for women. We hear so much about it for men. That feeling of starting again when facing so many endings. I'd be happy to chat more about this with you. It's
funny, isn't it? Men can never hear enough about their midlife crisis, can they? But point taken, Kimberly.
Well, it's interesting because another patron has said midlife is an interesting age.
Yes.
I've started again 3 or 4 times since I was 43, and I believe there's more to come.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Jackie's mentioned 43, and then Kimberly is... Yeah, so we're just talking through the different stages, and between the ages of 35 to 56, well, I'm going to add it up to 58 actually. Between 35 to 58, there are a series of big transits happening. So 35, Uranus and Saturn are doing their thing, making you want more freedom and questioning your responsibilities. But you get your Jupiter return at 36, and Jupiter return is also quite an expansive time and a lucky time. And between the ages of 36 and 40, Pluto squares your natal Pluto, which shows a sort of internal struggle with authority that you've come to just think is okay. And you're working it out for yourself. Then at 42, which between 42 and 44, you get Uranus going completely opposite where it was at the time of your birth. And at the same time, you've got Saturn completely opposite where it was at birth as well. So you've got your need for freedom in the most stressed position it can be. So you feel like you don't have freedom to make a choice. And your relationship to authority and your responsibilities are stronger than ever. So
which
42 for 44.
So the midlife crisis,
which is their main,
or the traditional midlife crisis. Anyway.
Exactly, which is huge. And also at that time, you've also got Neptune squaring Neptune as well. And Neptune is about delusions and how we delude ourselves. And so
get a sports car.
Yeah, and I think that is where you get the male idea of breaking up from the relationship that's held you back, or that you perceive as held you back, and you project onto your partner and say, it's all your fault and you're the thing that's holding me back, and then you delude yourself that you are I don't know, sexually active or something.
Attractive.
And then try and hook up with a 20-year-old. It's a time when we have to break down our delusions and realise what's real. But it's interesting that Kimberly said the difference between midlife crisis for women and men.
Yeah.
Because obviously these astrological aspects aren't different for men and women. They're the same aspects happening.
But they will go into a societal lens after that.
Yeah, women when they cry for freedom or challenge the structure in their lives, I think tend to consider other people in their lives a lot more. They tend to think about their responsibility, possibly in a different way, because their attachments are different. And the Neptune square Neptune in a more feminine way, rather than deluding yourself about sexuality and going out and buying a red sports car and trying to hook up with 20-year-olds. The Neptune square Neptune can be seen as a time of really questioning yourself and not having much confidence and having a real crisis in confidence. And it can also show lower energy levels and possible illnesses coming in because your sort of like psychic spiritual barriers are down. And you're really sort of trying to understand who you are and where you're going from there. So it's a really, really sensitive time. And so it was not a surprise if women, when they're responding to that, go into the shadows a little bit and come out of the limelight, or come out of the public side of their life to get a bit of respite. Fascinating. Yeah, and And 49 is quite a big one.
Well, that kind of resonates really well with just the decimalised 50 anyway, doesn't it? And all that's happening at that time.
Yeah, it's interesting with the 50 because there is one transit going off around that time. Around the time of between 49 and 51, you've got your Chiron return. Now, the reason I want to mention Chiron is Chiron is a dwarf planet. To do with pain and childhood anxiety and our wounds that we're not able to get over or that we struggle to get over. But Chiron doesn't orbit the solar system in the same way as all the other planets do. It crosses Uranus's orbit and then crosses Saturn's orbit. And so it's the planets from Uranus, Neptune and Pluto represent the sort of outer consciousness, the deep, deep unconscious feelings that we all have in the world. And Saturn and Jupiter are sort of in between the solar system. They sort of represent the bridging between the unconscious. And then you've got the personal planets in the middle. So the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus and Mars. And that's showing us sort of like personal experience. And so you've got Chiron, the wounded healer, travelling from the deepest, darkest parts of the unconscious mind and bridging it and bringing those messages from the unconscious over to the personal. So it crosses Saturn to do with restrictions and it crosses Uranus to do with freedom. And so our wounds are really tied up with freedom and stuff. But around the time of 50, 51... Chiron makes its return, so it comes back to where it was at the time of your birth, and any childhood wounds that you've not got over really come back for you to deal with,
or not.
But the idea is that by the time you're 51, you should at least be sane enough to be able to do it. For a lot of people, like if I see this coming up in their charts, I will make suggestions a few years ahead of time that they might want to get their childhood wounds in order so that when it does happen, it's not like really bewildering them, or at least they've got some resources in place.
I wanted to put this to you see, and to everybody listening to this. Your strapline on your Patreon page, patreon.com/Louisa Tanner Munson, is Feel Good Astrology is creating powerful change through astrology. Now, on the one hand, and this is bringing in Tom's question, why are we fixated by the decimal decades passing rather than the cycles of 7?
Yeah.
In the industrialized, decimalized society, whilst we're talking about 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, etc., that is one measure. And within that, arguably, people are having midlife crises, causing all kind of chaos and being misunderstood. Teenagers are misunderstood, aren't they? Young adults are misunderstood. People having Saturn returns are misunderstood. Yeah, so it would appear that with our decimalised system, we haven't got it quite right.
Yes.
If, on the other hand, we were more acknowledging and accepting of the 7-year cycles, and people recognised that when they got to 42-ish, they might have certain feelings that in our decimalised, industrialised society would have them buying a sports car and dating people half their age. Not that we're judging that,
no,
but often the results are quite disastrous. Well, they're fun for a while.
Yeah, well, the results resonate out not just from the individual, but affect everyone around them.
Yes, including the 20-year-olds and the 40-year-old that they've left behind.
Yeah.
Now, again, not judging that, but if you had the wherewithal, knowledge and understanding of yourself, you might not act out in that way, mightn't you? You might think, I can understand why I'm having these urges.
Yeah.
Why I'm quite seduced by these car adverts and why I have this uncontrollable urge to go down the nightclub, which I haven't done for 15 years.
Yeah, I mean...
You could understand it and then deal with it in a different way, couldn't you? Which is where the transformation and the powerful change comes about, I would suggest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hitting this age right now. I'm right in the middle of all of these.
Yeah.
And another way of looking at the stage between 42 to 44 is it becomes apparent that whilst you still feel young, you're not actually young anymore. You're not classed as young. Well, you might be by a 90-year-old.
If we're making a video of this, you'd have a football crowd going, "You're not young anymore. You're not young. You're not young. You're not young anymore."
It's like a dawning realisation, isn't it, that that you like.
Yeah.
You might
So
be
what better way to deal with that?
You might be talking to people in their 20s and 30s and saying, "Yeah, I like to hang out and blah blah blah, do this," and they look at you.
Do you like Justin Bieber?
and you get that look, and you realise that you're actually kind of out of sync with people that you used to be in sync with.
Yeah.
And I'm not referring to a boy band either, but. Did I get that right?
In sync, yeah, I get it.
In sync, yeah, okay. See,
I'm
so out of sync with everything.
You're so out of sync with NSYNC, but
you
stand no chance of joining a boy band either.
No.
And you're beginning to realise this.
Yes,
not
I'm
you,
very
but obviously, yeah.
But yeah, it's a time when you realise that you are actually going to have to start making new life goals and letting go of some of those thoughts that you've had about who you are as a person, and shifting your consciousness.
Now, in a decimalised, industrialised culture, where it has become normalised to have a little bit of a regression and buy a car or a motorbike. Do you remember when everyone thought I'd brought a Harley Davidson when I was 50?
Yeah.
That's completely legitimised. There's no question about why I would do that, because everyone understands why men do that.
But you hadn't done it. That's
I hadn't, and that was the funny thing about it.
But people were congratulating your great choice in.
That's right. But you might, like feeling those urges with a different understanding of the sevens, you might say, "Oh, I see what's going on. I
want to go on a great holiday."
Yeah. I mean,
I want to study something. I want to expand my mind,
and I don't want to look a pillock in a nightclub. Really.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or waste a load of money, or cause untold
misery
upset to people around me as I outplay my unresolved difficulties.
It is definitely a time when people go through shift.
Yeah.
A huge shift, and
the shift hits the fan.
The shift does definitely hit the fan, and it's a really unstable time for people around those ages.
And if we knew about these cycles, we could perhaps offer a little more understanding and compassion rather than the polarisation that can take place.
Yeah.
Because I suppose when people do act out in that way, they're very defensive or apparently unbothered by it. So they're quite hard to reach, aren't they? It's like, it's my life, I'll do what I want with it.
Well, like Saturn return times are perfect for that.
Yeah, and the compassion connection drops, doesn't it? Yeah. So then, more chaos can be caused. But, there's no perfect answer. It's just a very interesting question that Tom asks. And what a different world it would be if we were more in tune with these cycles that you're speaking of, rather than the sort of industrialised ones.
Yeah, and the same for Kimberly, because Kimberly's question actually links directly into what Tom's asked, oddly enough, because those cycles do correspond. Yeah,
and then they play themselves out according to the norms of society as well, don't they? Which, as we see, are very different for men and women.
I mean, another big one, I've mentioned the 51...
unfairly, I would add.
Around 58, 59 is another biggie, because you've got your second Saturn return. So the struggles that you had at 29, if you look back at the themes that are going on for you, and how you coped with it with your first Saturn return, that will give you a big clue as to what's going to happen in your second Saturn return.
I was going to say, and no one really cares that much.
No, by the time you're 58, 59, hopefully you're a lot more relaxed about who you are and not wanting to prove who you are.
And people assume that you will be, so they're less sympathetic, I think. And
definitely,
that is a harsh wicket, isn't it? To know that people think you should have it figured out by then. And I think most people
still figuring it out, or figure it out as they're dying.
Yes, absolutely. Or they there is that thing, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the chap's name. I did interview him a long time ago. Pop star turned kind of spiritual teacher, but who says that we are a guru in charge of a mental patient. That doesn't really change, does it? Is it Jamie Cato? And as we go through these ages, people are less sympathetic as we get older, because they think we should have figured it out, when there's still the same kind of fears and insecurities. But armed with this sort of insight, you might give yourself a little bit more credit or compassion
and grace
and so on, and know that people are looking up to you to be an elder.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a time where you can become an elder. I mean, they like the 40s to 50s are definite times when you're like an elder in training.
Yeah. That's right, trainee sage.
And it's great, like, if you've got kids, or if you've got kids around you, or young adults around you, it's great to be able to view their lives around cycles.
Yes.
I mean, you've got two daughters, one that's just like turned 22, so has been going through the 21 cycle.
Absolutely.
And you've got another one that's going through the Saturn cycle.
Absolutely. And I remember my own
and your boy is going through the 7 cycle at the same time.
What a bunch.
Well, that's what I mean. Your kids were all born in accordance with a progressed moon. That's why they're all in sevens apart from each other.
And I have a calamitous Saturn return of my own to share with them. And to speak to speak of no, not the one coming, the one I had before. The first Saturn return.
Oh, when you were 29.
I think was a really,
Tell us about it.
Do you know what? It gave me so much. When I discovered that there was such a thing, it gave me a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
To know that these sort of, uncontrollable and devastating forces in my life had some sort of explanation. And that I wasn't just a complete idiot.
Yeah.
I was only partially an idiot. and other things were at work.
Yeah. And
it has given. I take it for granted now, and I see this, on behalf of other people who might be going through it, that it's not your fault. I guess nothing is anyone's fault in a way, but
nothing's our fault. But we can choose to be at cause, can't we?
We can be at cause and be responsible on the one hand, but we can also accept that we live in a soup of forces which have a different effect on us. So there's society's forces, which we're very well aware of, but there are natural forces, and these forces that you're speaking of that are upon people, that if they're not excuses.
No.
They are not justifications. They are, it's a bit like, you got wet because it was raining. That's not a blame thing. That's just a kind of statement of what happened.
Yes.
And I think this is the same with these astrological forces. It's helpful to understand them.
It's also worth pointing out as well that we're not all born with an equal astrological wicket. Some people do have more challenging charts than others. Yeah. I'd be lying to say that wasn't the case, that we're all born equally chart-wise. Yeah. We've all got stuff to express and live.
You've been listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson, and this recording has been made possible by all you lovely supporters at Patreon. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.